Awesome. So that's just a little taste of our experience there in Togo. If you actually didn't get the opportunity to see my presentation last week during the Sunday morning session, you can check that out actually online. Well, actually the best way would be, I'll show you here in just a second, through our app, okay? And I'm having a problem with connections here. But if you want to check out the service from last week, my presentation, what was put together, you can download our app, and that can be done in the App Store just by searching for Grace Batavia. Also, if you go to our Facebook page, that's just Grace Baptist Church, Batavia. It's always posted on there. And even right now, tonight, we're live streaming this service that you can watch either on Facebook or on our app or also on our website. Website's an old thing now, so I figured I'd list that as well, gracebatavia.org, if you would like to avail yourself to that. But for tonight, the team is going to be joining me up here, so if you guys want to come up. And what I did in that service last week in the morning was really just go day by day, kind of quick overview. You guys can file down here. This is my spot, okay? I just did a quick day-by-day overview of what we did in Togo, what our responsibilities were, and tonight we're able to go a little deeper on those things. And so what we're going to do is I've got some pointed questions for each person up here, and then also the second set of questions will be more so their spiritual takeaways or things they learned. And then the third set, we're going to offer it up to you guys. We know the Historics have family here. Many of you are, we're not just a supporting church of the Historics, but many of the individuals here also support the Historics. And so, we just want to give you the opportunity to ask us questions about what we experienced over there. And just like I like to use the illustration of going from black and white to color. That's kind of what our trip experience was. We knew a lot about what was going on in Togo, but being there, feet on the ground, eyes in person, we got to see the ministry that's going on over there. So we're just going to start off. I guess I better sit down and not stand the whole time. That'd be awkward. But we're going to start off. I've been asked this many times from people. Did anyone get sick on the trip? And that's why this question's going to Ashley. So Ashley, you can tell us a little bit. We got 2 mics. We'll pass them around. Tell us a little bit about your sickness experience and what that was like.
I got malaria in Togo.
Day one.
It was day 1, actually. We're kind of thinking I got bit by a mosquito the day we got in. But it didn't really fully show itself till like 2 or 3 days later. We had been hiking and out in the heat, and I had eventually ran out of energy completely and passed out. But after I passed out, I ate some lunch and I was feeling better, and then about an hour later, I started feeling horrible again. And my mother-in-law, Brenda, automatically goes, I'm taking her to the hospital. She has malaria. She's cycling. And everyone's like, well, she's probably dehydrated. She's just not feeling good. She's like, I know malaria. I have had it. And they're like, it's not possible. It's only been a couple days. She's like, I'm taking her to the hospital. So I think what was encouraging to me was the day before we took a tour of the hospital, and Bill, who had given us the tour, was like, if any of you get sick, this is the room you're going to be in, and you'll be taken care of with great nurses and doctors and air conditioning and a nice bed to relax on. So as we were driving to the hospital, I know exactly what room I'm going to go in. I know that I'm going to be taken care of, and I was taken care of the same way that I would be in the States. I got an IV. Caleb and Brenda were there with me, and a couple days later, I was feeling a lot better because I had the medication, and then I was able to officially join in on all the activities with the group.
Yep. So the third leg she's growing, totally unrelated to the side effects with everything. But
That's why I'm wearing the skirt.
a lot of people were wondering, Caleb, how have things changed for your parents since you were last there? You've had 2 experiences there now. Tell us a little about that.
Being able to be a part of my family and just see the process and see the growth has been a huge blessing. I think, it's encouraging because my parents really do the same things that they've always done. My My dad does maintenance. He leads Bible studies. He meets with men, which is a picture of my childhood. My mom has people into the house all the time, meets with single ladies. She's an encouragement to everyone around her, which is really what they did in the States. And so it's cool to see them doing what God prepared them for in the States, in Africa as well, which is also challenging for us, and what are we doing here in the States. But on top of that, they gave up a lot. They sacrificed a lot to be there. And I think the second time that I was there, I really began to see that in them. They were doing what God made them to do, but they were really feeling the price that it did cost. And I think, they came back on furlough, and then they went back again. And this time I felt like they were really home. Before it was like they were there doing what they did, but this time they were actually home, and they seemed comfortable. And just seeing them on furlough and seeing them there, this is different for them. This isn't necessarily where they are who they are, and there is home for them. So I think that was a big change, and I think they've really come to be comfortable there and be who they are there.
Medically, a lot of people have asked me what we were able to do there, and I had an idea, but I would not be able to give you a good description of what went on, other than babies were born. But Dr. Yeager is a OBGYN here in Batavia, and I wanted to ask you, what kind of surgeries, deliveries were performed while you were there? How'd they go?
I had to do 2 rescue C-sections for premature babies. One was a missed twin, and the other one was in severe distress, and the outcome was very good, fortunately, by God's grace. Other than that, I planned 2 surgeries. One was a botched prolapse operation by a previous surgeon, and that failed. And this woman was under severe distress by her husband, who mocked her about the prolapse. And so I restored her anatomy best I could, and hopefully this will last much longer than the first operation that failed. And we had a 4th patient slave for hysterectomy, but she had a surprise pregnancy, and she was very, very elated about it. She forgot about her prolapse.
Oh.
Thank you.
So not only did we have medical work, but we did construction on a new house there being built for a missionary. And so, DJ, did you have a chance to work with the Togolese, and what was that like?
We did a little bit. We spent, Hans and I and Corey John, we spent a lot of time down at the house. Hans and I were there daily. I feel like when we got there, there was probably 10 to 12 guys that were working on the outside of the house primarily. We started outside the house, so anywhere from 8 to 10 guys at any given time were pretty much just watching us. It was interesting just to see, like, they were kind of enamored with us. Just, I don't know what it was, if it was just because we were like getting after it or what, but their normal day there is far different than our normal day. Their culture is way more laid back. There's a mid-morning break, a 2-hour break in the middle of the day, and they still end at the time when we would normally end. So we're like...
I could get used to that.
We were cruising because we went to work, and so that was our primary task. And so I don't know if we earned a little credibility out of the gate, but as the week went on, they were eager to jump in and do things. One morning, we were going to pour concrete, and they were out there throwing rocks up at this fruit in a tree, trying to get it down. And so we're getting ready to pour concrete, and I stopped. There was one guy, his name was Big. I just motioned to him to come over and told him to get in the bucket of the backhoe. I picked him up in the bucket of the backhoe so he could grab like 5 of these fruit down. He got down. He was mobbed by people, all the guys trying to get the 5 fruit that he had. So they're just a people that, they're just in need. And this was like a sweet snack for them, and they made me have one, and it was wretched. I tucked it in the cup holder, and I got rid of it later. But like that little gesture to them, it was amazing. Like their countenance turned at that point, after we poured concrete, I gave them some candy, and it was like, they were beaming from ear to ear every time I saw them, smiling, and then they all knew my name. And so it was fun for the last day or so there once we turned the corner on a hard task, and they did a great job. So.
Yeah. A lot of people wondered what life was like in the villages. Some of us had opportunities to go to like a house church or a Bible study in the more remote villages. So Mike, were you able to go to a village, and what was that like?
Yeah, Eric was going out on a Sunday morning to one of the village churches, and he says, I can only take 2 of you. So he chose Chad and I and asked if we wanted to go. We said, great. So we hopped on the motos and we went out quite a ways. And the church consisted of a 10-foot by 10-foot thatched roof with some poles and some makeshift benches. And there was probably maybe six adults there and quite a few kids. And actually the service was led by Adam Drake, who's a longtime missionary over there, and he runs the radio station. And Eric actually translated, because the service was actually in 4 different languages. So it was kind of hard to follow, but it was in French mainly, and then Anafo and Bobo, and then Eric translated into English. And so it went on. The service probably lasted 2.5 to 3 hours, and of course was interrupted by many animals, ducks and chickens and goats walking through, and people walking through, and you have to greet them and whatever, but but it was extremely interesting. And this one woman who had been coming on and off for about 6 months, an older woman, she was very interested and asked a lot of questions and about God and Jesus, and wanted to know a lot about what was going on, and found out that her son was one of the local witch doctors there. And as the service went on, Eric and Adam Drake were really explaining the gospel to her, and she, at the end of the service, she actually accepted Jesus Christ. And that was really, really high point of my whole trip, to see that, and it was pretty awesome.
Going back to a more medical related question, Rachel, what are some differences in terms of healthcare there? You had the opportunity to work, was it 4 12-hour shifts in the hospital? You were able to kind of observe things going there. Just compare and contrast a little for us.
Well, there's a lot that's different there. One, your religion is very upfront. Whether you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, just people bring in their religion. So there would be, if they were Muslim, there'd be prayer mats on the floor. They had the Jesus video playing, and it was just really inspiring to see that a lot of people really engage watching the Jesus video, and it's not just, the hospital isn't just sick people, it's not just patients, it's family. So in Togo, when a family member is hospitalized, it's actually up to the family to take care of them. So they will provide their food, they provide their water, they provide bathing needs, and that's all done by the family. So not only does the hospital have the opportunity to spread the gospel to just patients, but also to reach the family members. And there's a lot of respect in there for the Muslims that come in and have their prayer mats, and just whatever those needs are. The attitude in the hospital is greatly different than here in the States. It's a lot more relaxed. It's, the attitude is one of gratefulness. They're just grateful to have somebody try, because they know a lot of times the ultimate outcome is death. And just that you tried is huge. And so they're just extremely grateful. And they were extremely approachable as a people group. They would grab your hand. They were a lot more approachable and friendly than I had anticipated. Their pain tolerance puts us to shame because it's extremely high. Little kids, and I worked in the med-surg area, and it wasn't just adults. Everything is mixed in. You have ED, you have infectious disease, you have peds, and it's just your patient load for the day may be just that. The other nice thing is that not only is the family taking care of their family members, but when they get discharged, they are not discharged until their bill is paid. So you may have people sitting in the hallways just waiting because their family member hasn't paid their bill. And we do not take out their IV until their bill is paid. So that was actually very different than the States. They may be there for 4 hours, 5 hours, just sitting in the hallway until that bill is paid. And then once it's paid, then they're discharged. So that was a great difference, but it was an awesome opportunity.
And John, I was hoping you could speak. We made some good observations while we were there, but what impacted you most about the culture in general?
I was just surprised at what they have to do every day just to stay alive. They have to go somewhere to get their water and bring their water back for whatever needs that they need water for. Some people washing clothes every day, laying them out in the dirt to dry. You see little kids carrying sticks on their head. You'd see a 5-year-old with a bunch of sticks on her head, and then an older kid with more, and then an older woman with like a tree on her head. And every day they have to do that just to survive. In talking with Brenda, though, that they would work just enough to get their food for the day, and then they would quit. And then they would come back the next day because they're hungry, and they'd do some more work. And if they worked harder and got more money, then their neighbor could come and ask them for money, and if they didn't need it for that day to buy food, they would give them money. And so it's just kind of odd that they don't have like a bank account. If they get extra money, they would put it into a house, and you would see half-built houses everywhere. There's more. We went to Zerma Tea, and we were able to ask a lot of questions, and because there's more women than men, the men give the women opportunity to be married and have children, so they marry more than one wife, and that's also the way they can have more workers, so they have as many kids as they can have, so they can have more kids to carry trees and get water and work. And I guess that's it.
Yeah. Kind of moving our focus to the Kasoricks, Eric and Brenda there. Adrian had the opportunity to work alongside Brenda in just her everyday routines. So I asked her to kind of share, what did you observe about Brenda's role in ministry? I know that's hard to wrap up into just a few minutes, but just some highlights or observations from that.
Yeah, Brenda does a lot. She kept us hopping, and we were only doing just the basics. We did a lot of meal prepping and food processing whenever we would go and buy food. You have to do that a lot because the food doesn't keep for a long time. Whenever we would buy food, we have to come home and we have to put it in the sink, and it has to soak for 20 minutes, and it has to be completely dry before we can eat it, and it has to be stored a certain way, and that has to be done with anything fresh in any of the food. And a lot of the food that they get, that they need, they have to get in a different city. We went down to the market in Mongo, the local market, and you can get some fruits and vegetables and things there. But we went to the Walmart there, and she was so pumped and excited about this can of vegetables that she could actually get there instead of having to go 2 hours away to Cara. So, and she went on about it all day long, about how excited she was about this can of vegetables. So it's quite something, and that's just food. We also went during the dust season, and so there's dirt everywhere. It's very, very dirty. So just to keep a somewhat clean home is an incredible amount of work. And she's constantly filtering the water because the water that comes out of the tap has to be run through these filtration systems, so they constantly have to be refilled with big pots of water. And if you know Brenda, there's always something wrong with her. So at the time there was something wrong with her elbow, I think. So but she's a horse, so she just keeps on with the pots of water, and I'm taking them out of her hands and saying, no, you can't do that because your body's always falling apart. But she doesn't complain, and she just does it. And I only saw a tiny, tiny bit of what she does. I didn't see her doing any homeschooling because she took that time off with Michael. She does homeschooling. She does project office for the hospital. She takes Togolese ladies in and spends time with them and witnesses to them too. There was just tons that I didn't even get to see that I know that she does do. They also have a dog that needs to be trained so that when Michael leaves, she has protection. And it's really important that she has this dog, and this dog needs to be trained. So she's doing that as well, and she has a prayer room that she spends a couple hours in every single day, and so she just works. She's amazing.
All right, Hans, you own your own business. You're a worker. You manage guys. We got an opportunity for a little over a week to observe Eric and his work. So, what did you observe about Eric's role in ministry there?
Well, I guess first thing off that I noticed right away, just obviously staying with them, was waking up first thing in the morning, and there's a little bit of hustle and bustle, but Eric's really quick to grab his cup of coffee, and he's right up to prayer room that they have upstairs, and that was something consistent through our whole time there. And I know that's something he does regularly because I know that while there's many tasks that need to be done, he's not forgetting what's first and foremost, and that's his ministry there and the guys that he's leading, and so he's preparing for that time that we have. Jumping from there, we headed over to the hospital, and I guess, something that Pastor Corey described it as is the whole black and white, praying for them daily as a family, and then getting to go there and see it in color was a perfect way to describe it because, we have heard that he's in maintenance at the hospital and don't know what the hospital looks like, but there's a whole lot more than just a hospital building. There's homes all over the compound that surgeons, doctors, teachers stay in. There's a school there. There's the guest house, which is where short-termers come and stay. There's a kitchen, water treatment. I mean, there's so many aspects there, and he's the guy. Just very skilled, and I think he's grown a lot in that. He's had to have, just because things are difficult there. But then just the way he starts off the morning with the guys that he's leading, just a great, 15, 20-minute Bible study. And the way that he leads those guys throughout the workday, a lot of patience, as DJ mentioned, work ethic is different there. You cannot expect things to be exactly the same as they are here. And for him to have the patience that he does, and again, the way that he leads them with love, that you can tell that he has they have a lot of respect for him. And multiple times at the end of the day when, we've been working and we're not used to that, and he's used to it, but, a long day of working, just getting things done constantly back and forth around that compound, to see him sitting on a bench outside of the shop talking to one of his employees. And I know that he's having, more than just a work conversation, because he's explaining things, and I can just tell by his demeanor that they're having a spiritual conversation. That was really cool, and I saw that, several times. But just his whole relationship and realizing that that's his calling there is just a great thing to see.
I've been asked by many people, what would we do different if we were to go again? And first thing is, I'd raise some support to get this flight that some doctors take from Mongo to Lomé, so you don't have to do the 12-hour car ride, because that was hands down the hardest thing we did our entire life. No, it is amazing once you go, you see how things operate. We would know now how to put less on the casorics for them driving all the way down to pick us up and go. I mean, that's a whole day of driving for them just to have us there. I think we left being a blessing to them in many ways, just financially, but also just an encouragement. But that's a lot for them. So I think now having gone, we can use the contacts that now we have there to bypass a lot of that. Even the logistics with Brenda, now I've got contacts at the hospital that I can use to set up things, not having to put so much on them. And so that's one thing we would do different. We also took a very multifaceted group, medical emphasis, construction emphasis, pastoral emphasis. Going another time, we might just take a group of construction guys, or we might just take a bunch of nurses and doctors, and just keep it one specific. But this trip was great in just testing the waters in all the areas, and it was just there. It's really hard to say, oh, this was negative about it or that, because, I mean, you could just see God's hand in it through the whole process, even in getting all that luggage there. That was, we had stuff coming in from missionary families there on the compound, the hospital itself, the pharmacy, Eric's supplies, and I'm like, how are we going to have enough room to take all this? And then, boom, the exact number of suitcases we could take was the exact number we filled. So, you just see God's hand through that entire process. It was really neat. I want to shift the second set of questions and just, answering really quick. This is for Ashley and then Rachel. What was your biggest fear heading into this trip, and how did you see God work despite your fear?
I don't know necessarily that I really thought about oh, I'm so afraid to go to Africa, because Caleb had lived there. So any questions I had, he's like, okay, this is how it's going to be and this is what's going to happen. I think the biggest fear I had was that I was going to get sick from the food or water or something, because we can't put our toothbrush under the water. You can't open your mouth in the shower to talk, you have to be so careful about everything. But even though that was my fear, God still allowed me to get sick a different way. And it was a sickness that I literally had to sit for 48 hours and do absolutely nothing. And that was driving me crazy, because everybody was out doing things and helping Brenda and Eric and serving, and I couldn't take a dish to the sink. I couldn't mop the floor or pick up things. I had to just rest. And God just taught me to not, in Psalm 46, it talks about be still. Not just be quiet, but to let go of that control that I think I have, and just to be patient and know that He's got it. And whatever I could have done in that time that I was sick, He's going to use somebody else. It's not just me that could do that thing and serve that way. So just being able to grow in patience and being still.
Rachel.
I had a lot of fear, and it had nothing to do with really the trip or anything. It had everything to do with the hospital. And so when we found out we were going to Togo, my verse was 2 Corinthians 12:9. My grace is sufficient to you, but my power is perfected in your weakness, because that's how I felt. I had no idea, after being in a specialized field of nursing for 18 years, would I be able to go back to whatever it was that I would have to do? And God was just amazing in that I showed up at the hospital every day with God leading me. And it was just Him and I. And that was probably the best thing that could have happened, because you really just empty everything out. There's a hymn that says, with these empty hands I bring, to the rugged cross I cling. And that's how I felt. I walked into an environment where I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any coworkers. I didn't get an orientation. It took me till day 3 to find where the clean utility room was, and that was okay. I didn't speak the language, and in fact, unfortunately for a lot of the Togolese, I did discharge teaching with very poor French, and they were so frustrated. And I'm sure, but they still went home. I just hope they did what they were supposed to do. I take no responsibility. So it was incredibly challenging, but it was the most awesome experience I've ever had. And just the closeness, when you get rid of all the distractions and it's just you and God, because you're essentially at your weakest and you have nothing. It was just a great experience to watch. It wasn't anything I did, it was what God did through me. So I went with a lot of fears, and now I look back and I think, oh, how foolish was I? Because they were really inconsequential.
And then share one significant spiritual moment during your trip. We'll do Mike and then Dr. Yeager. And if you can, just keep it a little more concise so we can have room for some questions at the end.
Boy, there was really a lot of things on that trip that were spiritual. But first Sunday night, we had church for all the white folks. And we started, and Corey we started singing, and I'll tell you, it hit me where I was, and I couldn't even sing because I was overcome with what God was doing in the lives of all these people who have sacrificed their time and to be there, and it was overwhelming, totally.
My voice brought you to tears. Absolutely. In a good way. All right. Put that on a resume.
When I had a talk with Bill and Melanie, the hosts in the guest house, that I was able to stay in great comfort. I think Bill mentioned that the society in Togo is a society of guilt and shame, and that struck me as unusual. But as I talked to patients and got to know the people a little better, it became ever more obvious to me that they have no eternal hope. The Muslims have no hope. So that's one of the fundamental reasons for their passivity and their lack of organization. And so in that context, it came to my conscience and my attention again that I was greatly blessed to have so many witnesses in my life to be exposed to the promise of eternal salvation, and Lordship salvation is the only thing that counts. Thank you.
What did God show you about himself on this trip? DJ and then Adrian.
God showed me a bunch, but one of the big things, which is a big thing, was just how sovereign God is. It was a minor thing. We came to work. We started right out of the gate. Eric took us over to the house. He said, this is where you're going to be working. This is who you're going to be working with. And that whole little interaction right at the beginning of the trip, the who we're going to be working with part, it just didn't seem to go too well. The guy that we were going to be working with was kind of like I wasn't really sure how to read him, so I spent the next few days thinking on that a lot. And so it was neat to see by the end of the trip, we had a blast working with him. He was great to work with. We were taking pictures with him at the end. He wants us back. We'll all go back. It was a great time, and I spent 3 days thinking about stuff that I didn't need to.
I was also going to say God's sovereignty. It was really cool to see how he works out all the details, and how he's the God of so many different people. And it was also cool to see how he uses us and how he chooses to do his work through us. And I learned that a little bit of faith and willing hands, and he just equips you to do the job that he's asked you to do.
Hans, what would you say God showed you about yourself during the course of this trip?
So ever since Eric was here months ago, Eric and Brenda were here, we were just starting the planning of this trip, and right off the bat when we were planning this trip, I was like, so what are we going to be working on? What are we going to be doing? Because I'm just used to planning things, and I want to be profitable, and if I'm going to go, like, I want to be a blessing that way. And to me, being a blessing is getting a whole bunch of work done. And so right up until the time we left, I was like, so what are we going to be working on? What am I going to be doing? And they were just like, well, we don't know yet. That's not how, it was just like, the project is in process. So, and right before we left, we just had a conversation. And it was like, you know, them being sent out from here, our goal is to go there and just enrich them and to be a blessing to them. And that may mean going to hang out with them for the day and just spend time with them, sitting down, having a long conversation that just encourages their hearts. And that was just like, yeah, duh. And so for me, I was like all about getting a bunch of work done, but really, like, I just really enjoyed the times we got to sit. So I guess God just taught me that, like, he's going to use me how he's going to use me. And he's given me certain abilities, and yeah, he's going to use me to do that, but he's also using me in a way that maybe I wasn't planning. So I just got to be ready to shift gears and do what I need to do. So.
Caleb, share an example how your teammates were a blessing to you.
I mean, thinking about this team, you know, I can't. This team is an 11 out of 10 team. You know, going into it, I was excited about the team that was put together, but looking back, I was just really blown away. You know, the team it was interesting because I had seen a lot of teams come through from my parents' side of things. You know, some teams that you were sad when they left, and some teams that you were happy when they left. You know, and just really wanting to be a team that was a good team. We really focused on being an encouragement, and you know, I think I could go through and talk about how each person here was an encouragement to my family. Obviously, I'm not going to do that because it'd be longer than I have, but you know, I think everyone had the attitude, like Hans was saying, of encouraging them. I think also everyone was open to learn. Everyone was open to be changed. Everyone was open to have their heart touched and their foregone conclusions changed. And I think also, you know, everyone was excited to bring back word of what was going on. You know, and just being able to see a team go over and encourage my family the way that I wanted them to was a big blessing to me. And I mean, again, I cannot praise this team enough. They did a fantastic job. A mix of working and encouragement and just having fun with my parents and doing what they like to do. It was a great team, a great time.
And then last, John, what did you learn about missions from this trip?
What I learned is you don't need to spend 2 years going to language school. You don't need to spend a year raising support and make that a commitment for the rest of your life. You can just go over there short term. There were several families that we saw there. There was a young couple, had young kids, just planned their vacation time to spend a month there. They've done that for a few years. And another retired couple, several retired couples work in maintenance, and their wife would work in the hospital. And if I had a choice between a Disney vacation and going back to Togo, I'd take my family back to Togo. I had a great time there. It was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to go back.
Very cool. And for me to answer this one, just observing Eric and Brenda, like I said it in my presentation last Sunday, just to see that God wires people to do what they are wired to do. They are handcrafted to do what they're doing over there. And it was done in this context, and now it's in Togo. But just to see the specificity with how God's crafted them. And then really too, just in general, we're all wired to be doing missions, just in a different context or in a different way. And that was just really neat to see. And to see the group, like John was saying, I want to do short-term missions now and plan that. You know, they're already talking when they can go back. So That's super encouraging to hear. I wanted to open it up to you guys. We kind of laid a foundation. You know what went on, but we've got about 10 minutes here remaining that you guys can ask some questions, some more details off of things if you have them. And if you just state it really loud, I'll repeat the question. So because it's being recorded and live streamed, that way viewers can hear it as well. So just speak up and say it so I can hear it. Yeah.
What were the temperatures like when you got there, and how did the transition go from adjusting to this to that?
Okay, the question was, what were the temperatures like when we were there, and did we adjust well? Who's going to answer this one? Hans.
Depends on if you got to sleep upstairs or down. So the air conditioning in the upstairs of the house is not working, and the guys got to sleep in a big bedroom upstairs. The
Slumber
girls got
party
to
all
sleep-
week.
What's that?
It's a slumber party all week.
Yeah. And the girls got to sleep in Michael's room downstairs. But I don't know, in the middle of the day, in the hottest point, I think it was right around 100 a lot of the days, and I think it creeped into the mid-teens or upper teens a couple of times. I know we took a couple pictures of the thermometer.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely an adjustment. The first night or two, I probably slept an hour or two, just because it was wet
Yeah.
and sweaty. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But as far as the day, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, working in the dry heat wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. But when we went down the Lome, just, going 10 hours down, being, on the coast there, it was so much more humid. And that, we agreed, working 10 days and that would have been miserable. So we're thankful for the dry heat up in Mongo. Other questions? Skip.
What are we looking at for hours of labor that Eric and Brenda put in each day?
The question was, what are we looking at in hours of labor for Eric and Brenda each day? So Caleb, you look like you want to take this one.
I mean, I think depending on how much sleep they get, probably somewhere between 18 and 20 or around there. I mean, it depends on the day, but they're constantly, life there is work, I mean, life is work, but life there is more work. And, if they're awake, they're doing something. And, my dad's constantly on call, constantly doing something, constantly fixing something. Even on lunch break, people are coming up and saying, hey, this is something that's broken. This is something that I could use here, or what do you think about doing this? And so 24/7, they're doing something. I think it would be difficult to actually put an exact number on it, because it's just really how much they're awake.
Yeah. Brenda had said that Eric hadn't had a day off, and she didn't know how long. He just works constantly. And it's because, for him to eat lunch with us at the guest house was nice, because it was a meal that, Brenda didn't have to make and all that. But you have a missionary coming up to you, you have a doctor coming up to you, you have someone coming up to you, hey, this is broken, my toilet won't flush, whatever. And he's just constantly being bombarded with work. So Eric he's an animal. I mean, he's just always working. Any other questions? Yes. Okay, the question was, can you talk about Michael's role there and what's next for him? Adrian.
Michael, we called the yes man while he was there. Brenda was constantly, Michael this, Michael that, Michael this, Michael that, and he did all sorts of things for us, and he's also doing school. He helps everything. He works with Eric, he's homeschooling, he does all sorts of things with Brenda, and he needs to accompany Brenda a lot for safety reasons, and she has him happen, and he should be going to, this summer, he should be going off to the Navy, so.
Yep. He also was Rachel's chauffeur for 12-hour shifts. He would drive and pick her up from the hospital, bring her back. He is ladies around his age, he's a good catch, okay? Just saying. He's a good dude. But even Brenda had said, days her elbow doesn't work and she can't, cook a meal. Michael cooks a meal for when people are coming over. And I'm like, I I couldn't even make a box of mac and cheese at his age, let alone cook a whole meal. So they're going to feel the loss of Michael when he comes back to the States. So he does a lot. Other questions? Yes, Mr. Boughton.
I know you worked hard, but what did you do when you had the opportunity to relax and do something else?
What did we do when we had the opportunity to relax? Oh, man.
That's the answer. What did we do?
Well, even the sightseeing we did was not relaxing.
We went to Zermatt.
Yep.
We went to the Drakes. We spent time with other missionaries.
Yeah.
So it was neat just to see what other folks are over there doing. Adam Drake was mentioned. There's a radio ministry that started there. We went to their place one night, had a great time just hanging out. He's got a killer African setup over there if anyone wants to go see it. So we spent time there. We went to another missionary's house. And I mean, we went to the pool a lot, to be honest, because you just needed to be refreshed a fair amount. And then we spent a lot of time in the living room at night before bed. We would all land there and decompress. And one night we spent a lot of time going around in a circle just talking about things. And so there was a good bit of that time, which is what Hans referenced, that just everyone let their hair down. You know, it's 90 degrees, 93 in the house or whatever, and everyone's in shorts and t-shirts, and you're all just hanging out. So that kind of stuff doesn't happen here in the States. It can only happen on a trip like this, really. So that probably was really refreshing for Eric and Brenda, and I think equally as refreshing for us, just to be able to, like...
Especially while we did that, Eric was sitting in his comfy chair eating pretzels. So, he's living the life. He doesn't get those. We brought those for him. So that was him enjoying it. Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, did you guys have an opportunity to minister to the Westerners that are working inside the compound other than the Kasorics? And if you didn't, do you see an opportunity for that?
Okay, were we able to minister to the other missionaries there on the compound? You want me to answer that? I would say going back, I'd probably have a better opportunity to do that. What's that? Nothing. I was able to preach 2 messages there, and I had some people come up to me after or talk to me at lunch about some things. But, you know, the relational credibility has to happen. But even meeting I'm the youth pastor here, meeting the young people and just being like, man, I want to come back and put on something for them, whether it's a week-long thing or a weekend thing. Missionary kids have I always felt bad for missionary kids, but man, they got like dirt bikes and there's no rules over there. You can do whatever you want. It's pretty cool. But they don't have a youth pastor, and they don't have, they got great godly parents, but to do something for them, that was tugging on my heart while I was there. But yeah, I didn't really have a lot of opportunity to sit down and, do any counseling or anything like that, but just simply leading worship for them. That's sometimes they'll just play a YouTube video and sing to that. So having real live led worship and real live preacher, I don't know how I did, but they normally watch a screen like with Andy Stanley or something, so probably didn't do as well as him. But just being there is an encouragement to them, I think.
I wanted to gather and encourage the women, and so we were able to do that one night. I had all of the missionary women, wives, and the daughters come one night, and I talked for a couple seconds to them to encourage their hearts, and then we had chocolate and we did face masks, and we had a really good time and we laughed, and I think they all really enjoyed it. It was just a nice time out with women to just enjoy it and chit chat and be encouraged. So that was fun.
I think we have time for about one more question. Tom. The question was sterilization and prep in a hospital, difference between states and here, or states in there.
Sterilization is international. It's American standard, but what is totally new is that a lot of gadgets we consider disposable in this country are reused in the third world, ad infinitum, pretty much. They're re-sterilized and reused. So we have too much of a throwaway society here, clearly. It's exaggerated. And the dust is everywhere. In the operating room, the red dust is all over in the hospital. It cannot be cleansed, so it's just part of the inventory, despite cleaning efforts.
Awesome. Well, we'll be up here after if any of you would like to come and talk to us. If you're considering, hey, I've got a skill set, I work in construction, I'd consider going. Talk to one of those guys. If you have a medical background, don't talk to me, talk to Dr. Yeager or Rachel, and they can give you more on, how you could do a short-term trip. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to close us in prayer, and then you can come up and chat with us if you'd like, and comment on our clothing and how you like it so much. Already have a lot of that. Let's just pray. Father, we have so much to thank you for God, just being in this country, being in this church building, being around these people, these believers. We take for granted so much of what you give us, and Father, forgive us when that's our mindset, when we overlook those things. But God, I thank you so much for the work that you're doing all over this world, in Togo, in the States here, in Batavia. God, it's just so great to see your gospel changing lives. It's a universal problem. People are broken. They need a Savior. And to see in Togo, when someone accepts Christ, the mother of a witch doctor, that excites us, and that's amazing. But yeah, that's the same incredible thing that happens when someone here surrenders their life to you. And we just thank you that you are a God who's living and active, and you're changing lives. We pray that you would continue to do so through the work the Castorics are doing and Mongo there at the hospital. God, that you would just encourage and strengthen them as they need it greatly. And just even provide another full-time maintenance man to work with Eric. God, that's such a need there. And you might even continue to call people out of this church body to be missionaries, whether in Togo or another country. We just thank you for your great work. In your name, Jesus. Amen. All right, you are dismissed.